people can see back in time? Well, I'm not sure myself, but Gail's got a very strange tale for you. It's a mystery what Mrs. Featherstone saw one day when she was out shopping.
Mrs. Featherstone was a pensioner who lived with her husband in Royal Tunbridge Wells in Kent. One summer's day, a few years ago, they popped into town as usual. Once there, they split up and arranged to meet later on.
We split up here and meet in half an hour?
Can we make it an hour? I've got a lot to do and I must get some shortbread.
Right. See you at the bandstand.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
After making her regular purchases, Mrs. Featherstone tried several shops for a tin of shortcake. Unsuccessful in her search, she went into a small store that she'd never been in before. Unfortunately, there was no shortcake. However, whilst she was looking around the store, she noticed an opening in a wall. Curiosity got the better of her, and she went to investigate. It was the entrance to a rather grand wood-panelled room. It was in stark contrast to the white fittings and shelves of the rest of the store. Mrs. Featherstone noticed that there were no windows in the room, and people were sitting there drinking coffee and chatting. She thought it odd that she'd not heard of the coffee shop before, and what was even stranger was that she could not smell any coffee. What was stranger still was that the people were wearing old-fashioned clothes. So, intrigued by it all, she made a mental note of it for future visits and went off to continue looking for her shortbread.
How bizarre! A woman sees a wooden-panelled coffee room that she'd never come across before, and the people in it were all in old-fashioned clothes. Well, the plot starts to thicken.
A week later, she was in town again, so she decided to visit the coffee shop that she discovered. But when she got inside, Mrs. Featherstone was stunned to discover that where the entrance to the coffee shop had been, there was now a white wall and pictures. She peered at it, but on close inspection, there was definitely no entrance to be seen. The room she had seen had disappeared.
So hang on. What's going on? Had Mrs. Featherstone made a mistake? Or could she somehow have slipped backwards in time to a period when a wooden-panelled coffee room had existed? Is there any logical explanation?
I've been doing some of my own research into this mystery. And it turns out that up until several years ago, a building belonging to the Tunbridge Wells Constitutional Club stood right next door to the shop that Mrs. Featherstone had been in. Now, inside that club, over 50 years ago, during World War II, there was in fact a coffee room with wooden-panelled walls. Now, I've managed to track down some people that knew about the coffee club.
The old Constitutional Club indeed did have a refreshment room, but it all closed when the club moved in about 1960.
Some of our members do remember that there was a mahogany panelled refreshment room for teas and coffees in our old building, which stood right next door to a food shop.
So confirmation that over 50 years ago there had indeed been a mahogany panelled coffee room in the building next door to the shop. It would have been in exactly the correct position to match Mrs. Featherstone's description.
Amazing! A coffee room used to be in the exact spot where Mrs. Featherstone had spied it through the gap in the wall. But the interesting thing is, it had closed down many years before. So is it possible that Mrs. Featherstone somehow had stepped back in time? Or maybe she had just conjured up a daydream of a coffee room which exactly matched the one which had existed many years before? Seems unlikely, doesn't it? What do you think?